When he vanished 10 years ago on an uncharted expedition deep into the mangrove maze, he left behind only a locked wooden chest and an unfinished map. Aria had spent years mastering his craft, matching his precise brushstrokes, and learning the complex geometry of tidal fluctuations. Yet no matter how many rivers she charted, the unwritten reach, the dead center of the Sundarbans on her grandfather's master map, remained a blank, inkless void. A sharp, rhythmic knock echoed at the wooden door, cutting through the sound of the falling rain. Aria paused, her quill hovering just above a fresh sheet of cotton paper. She glanced at the brass clock on the wall. 11:45 p.m. She stood up, pulling a heavy shawl over her shoulders, and unbolted the heavy iron latch. Standing on the threshold, drenched from head to toe, was a man wrapped in a thick oilskin cloak. Water trickled off the wide brim of his hat, obscuring his face, but Aria recognized the steady, unyielding posture immediately. It was Kazi, not her grandfather, but his namesake and her most trusted river navigator. He was a man born on the tides, possessing an uncanny ability to navigate treacherous waters in total darkness. "Kazi?" Aria asked, stepping back to let him in. "What are you doing out in this deluge?" Without speaking, Kazi reached inside his cloak and produced an object wrapped in oil-soaked canvas. He set it down gently on her drafting table. As the canvas fell away, it revealed a heavy cylinder crafted from solid brass, green with patina and sealed with thick black tree resin. "A boatman brought it to the docks from the southern channels," Kazi said, his voice as low and gravelly as river stones rubbing together. "He said a man with white hair gave it to him 3 days ago near the mouth of the Bay of Bengal, with strict orders that it only be delivered to Master Kazi's heir when the midnight tide reached its highest mark of the decade." Aria felt a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the draft from the open doorway. "Tonight is the full moon tide." "Aye," Kazi murmured. "The water is already creeping over the wooden piers." "Is this a joke?" Kazi grunted, frowning. "My grandfather never played jokes with cartography," Aria whispered. She picked up a magnifying loupe and examined the surface. "Look at the texture. This isn't paper. It's parchment treated with bioluminescent algae resin." She blew out the oil lamp, plunging the workshop into sudden, heavy darkness. Kazi gasped softly. On the table, the parchment began to glow. Fine, thread-like lines of turquoise and gold light bloomed across the surface, branching out like the nervous system of a great beast. Rivers, tributaries, and hidden creeks appeared in stark, luminous detail. Names written in an ancient, flowing script emerged along the banks. The boat was violently jerked forward, but instead of crashing, it slid smoothly onto a submerged shelf of polished limestone. The countercurrent caught the hull like a slingshot, carrying them rapidly around the edge of the roaring vortex, completely bypassing the danger and shooting the vessel out through a narrow, hidden archway of roots on the far side of the basin. The deafening roar vanished instantly, replaced once again by absolute, shimmering quiet. The Osprey glided into a tranquil, hidden lagoon, whose surface was as smooth and dark as black glass. Kazi cut the engine entirely. The boat drifted silently on the glassy water, leaving faint, glowing blue ripples in its wake. Aria stood up at the bow, her hands resting on the wooden railing as she stared in awe at the sight before them. Rising directly out of the center of the lagoon was a monumental archway constructed from massive blocks of weathered black granite, ancient moss clinging to its carved joints. The architecture was unlike anything from recorded history, neither Mughal, Sena, nor British. It looked as though it had been carved when the world was still young. Carved deep into the surface of the granite arch were complex geometric runes and representations of leaping tigers, swirling tides, and ancient constellations. As Aria watched, the runes began to pulse with a soft turquoise light, syncing perfectly with the rhythm of her own breathing. Behind the stone archway, there was no land. Instead, the space within the frame was filled with a shimmering vertical curtain of silver mist that rippled like liquid mirror glass. "It's a gateway," Kazi whispered, taking off his hat and holding it to his chest in reverence and fear. "In all my 40 years on these waters, I thought the old stories were just tall tales told by lonely fishermen." "My grandfather wasn't looking for trade routes," Aria realized, her voice trembling with wonder. "He was guarding this place." She reached into her satchel and pulled out her brass compass. As they drifted closer to the stone arch, the compass needle stopped spinning entirely. It began to hum softly, vibrating with a high-pitched harmonic resonance that mirrored the sound emanating from the glowing runes. Suddenly, a massive shape shifted in the darkness atop the stone platform at the base of the arch. Kazi reached instinctively for the iron boathook leaning against the gunwale, his body going rigid. "Aria, step back." "No," Aria said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "Look at it." Out of the deep shadows steps a creature of pure myth. It was a Bengal tiger, but it was larger than any living beast Aria had ever read about. Its shoulders stood as high as a grown man's chest. Its fur was a rich, deep mahogany, but where black stripes should have been, lines of brilliant gold and sapphire light hummed across its muscular body. The light moved and shifted across its coat, like flowing river currents. Its eyes were twin spheres of luminous amber, holding an intelligence that was distinctly non-human, filled with the weight of centuries. This was Matang, the ancient guardian of the Delta's hidden magic. The great beast padded silently to the edge of the stone platform, its massive paws making no sound against the wet granite. It looked down at the osprey, its ears flat, a low rumble vibrating in its chest, a sound that Aria felt in her bones rather than heard with her ears. Kazi dropped to one knee, bowing his head. "The Lord of the South," he murmured in Bengali. Aria, however, stood her ground. She reached into her bag, pulled out her grandfather's brass compass and the glowing parchment map, and held them out in her open hands. "I am Aria," she said, her voice clear and unwavering in the quiet night. "Granddaughter of Master Kazi. I have come to complete the chart and honor the pact of the tide." The giant tiger stepped closer, lowering its massive head until its glowing nose was only inches from Aria's hands. It inhaled deeply, smelling the brass, the ink, and the bloodline running through her veins. After a tense, breathless moment, the beast let out a long, warm sigh that smelled of fresh rain and wild jasmine. The glowing stripes on its fur shifted from aggressive sapphire to a soft, welcoming gold. Matang stepped back and sat upon his haunches, turning his head toward the shimmering curtain of mist within the granite archway. He let out a soft, chuffing sound, an unmistakable invitation. Aria secured the boat's mooring line to an iron ring embedded in the stone platform. With Kazi following closely behind, his trusty lantern held high, she stepped onto the ancient granite floor, and walked toward the curtain of silver mist. As she stepped through the portal, a sensation like cold water washing over her skin passed through her body, followed instantly by a wave of gentle warmth. On the other side lay a vast subterranean cavern, carved into the earth beneath the massive root system of the mother tree of the Sundarbans. Giant mangrove roots, thick as tree trunks, crisscrossed high above like the vaulted ceiling of a cathedral, woven so tightly together that not a single drop of the monsoon rain filtered through. Glowing blue moss covered the walls, illuminating a magnificent ancient library and observatory. Stone tables were stacked with thousands of clay tablets, preserved palm leaf manuscripts, and ancient brass globes that depicted celestial spheres rather than earthly geography. In the center of the chamber stood a massive circular table carved from solid white marble. Inlaid upon the table was a three-dimensional relief map of the entire Bengal Delta, every river, island, and mudbank rendered in exquisite detail. Aria walked slowly toward the table, her boots echoing in the vast space. Sitting on a stone stool beside the marble map was a familiar leather-bound field journal. She picked it up with trembling hands. On the cover, written in faded gold foil, were her grandfather's initials. She opened the journal to the last entry, dated 10 years prior. To whoever finds this chamber, be it my granddaughter Aria or another true keeper of the tide, the Sundarbans is not a static piece of land. It is an anchor between the physical world and the realm of primordial magic. The balance is maintained by the heart of the delta. If the map remains incomplete, the anchor will slip, and the forest will be swallowed by darkness forever. In the center of the marble relief map was a small, empty, circular indentation. Before Aria could read further, a deep, unsettling groan echoed through the cavern walls. The glowing moss on the stone turned from a tranquil blue to a sickly, violent red. The smooth air in the chamber grew cold and bitter, smelling of stagnant swamp water and burnt ozone. "Aria!" Kazi called out, drawing his boat hook as he backed toward the marble table. "Something is coming through the roots!" From the dark crevices between the upper mangrove roots, a thick, ink-black sludge began to ooze. It coalesced into shadowy, amorphous shapes, spirits of silt and rot, born from centuries of environmental destruction, illegal logging, and human greed that had bled into the delta's edges. The shadows slid down the walls, their hollow, glowing red eyes fixing upon the marble table and the ancient knowledge it contained. Matang bounded through the mist portal, letting out a roar that shook dust from the cavern ceiling. The tiger's glowing gold stripes flared with radiant brilliance as he leaped into the air, striking down two of the shadow creatures with paws encased in pure turquoise light. "They're trying to destroy the anchor," Aria realized, looking at the marble map. She looked back at her grandfather's journal. On the final page was a drawing of a complex geometric seal, a missing piece of the chart that tied all the rivers together into a single, unified, harmonic circuit. "Kazi, keep them away from the table," Aria shouted, pulling out her drafting pens and a jar of luminescent indigo ink from her satchel. "I'll hold them off," Kazi roared, swinging his heavy iron hook with expert precision, keeping the creeping shadows at bay alongside the mighty tiger. Aria slammed the journal open on the marble table. She uncapped her ink jar, dipped her silver-nibbed pen, and faced the relief map. Her hands, usually so steady, was shaking. The shadows were pressing in, Matang's roars echoing through the chamber as he fought valiantly against the rising tide of darkness. "Focus, Aria," she whispered to herself, closing her eyes for a single second. She remembered her grandfather's hand resting over hers when she was a child, guiding her brush across paper, teaching her the cadence of the water. Cartography isn't just drawing lines, little one. It's telling the truth about where you are. She opened her eyes. The fear was gone. With fluid, graceful movements, Aria began to draw upon the white marble. She didn't just copy the drawing from the journal. She felt the living pulse of the river outside, matching her pen strokes to the rhythm of the tide currently rising in the lagoon. She drew the sweeping curves of the Rupsha, the intricate braids of the Meghna, and the hidden subterranean channels of the unwritten reach. As her silver nib touched the stone, the ink didn't remain liquid. It sank into the marble, bursting into brilliance. Lines of glowing light flared across the relief map, flowing through the carved riverbeds like living water. The shadows shrieked as the light spread, retreating from the walls as the magic of the sanctuary flared back to life. Aria reached the final, central point, the circular indentation. She took her grandfather's brass compass, set it into the center of the marble map, and turned it 3 clicks to the right, aligning it with the true magnetic pole she had calculated. A deafening chime echoed through the cavern, as sweet and clear as a bronze bell ringing in an open field. A blinding column of golden light erupted from the compass at the center of the table, shooting upward through the root canopy and piercing through the dark clouds in the sky above. Across the entire Sundarbans, the stagnant waters cleared. The mangrove roots bloomed with luminescent night flowers, and the lingering darkness vanished into nothingness. The shadow creatures dissolved into harmless mist, leaving the cavern pristine, quiet, and filled with a sense of profound peace. Matang walked slowly toward the table, his light-infused fur glowing softly. He nudged Aria's shoulder gently with his massive head, purring so deeply that the marble table vibrated. Kazi lowered his weapon, leaning against his boat hook, breathing heavily as a wide, triumphant grin spread across his face. "You did it, girl. You finished the map." Aria looked down at the marble table. The map was now complete, a living, glowing testament to the harmony between the human world and the wild, ancient magic of the Delta. She reached down and picked up her grandfather's journal. As she flipped to the very back cover, she found a small, handwritten note tucked into a secret pocket, written in her grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. "My dearest Aria, if you are reading this, then you have proven yourself not merely a painter of lines, but a true keeper of the tide. The world outside will continue to change, but the Delta will always need a guardian to keep its secrets safe. The map is yours now." As the first golden rays of dawn began to filter through the root canopy, Aria packed her drafting tools into her leather satchel and looked back toward the mist portal. She knew she would return to Kulna, to her workshop on the Rupsha River, and live her life as a master cartographer. But now she carried a secret purpose. She was the bridge between 2 worlds, the keeper of the silent sovereign and the guardian of the unwritten reach.